everyday witches emerge from the shadows of secrecy. Broom closets are flinging open and witches are taking flight. Whether you are hiding in your cozy closet or flying with pride, stay for a spell as Witchcasting with Theodora Pendragon and her guests share magical moments, stir the cauldron, and debunk misinformation and misconceptions about paganism, witches, and our wonderful world of magic.
Hello, everyone. I have a double special guest today because she's been on the show before. Her name is Karina Blaz, and she aired back in March 5th, 2023, my 12th episode, when she talked about her spiritual journey. But today we're going to talk about something a little bit different because her journey has continued. Welcome, Karina.
Hi, Theodora. Thank you so much for having me again on this lovely podcast. So grateful to be here.
Well, I'm very excited to have you back. Your spiritual journey has continued, and now you are a death doula.
Yes, I am a death doula. I just recently graduated with Going with Grace. And the story of how I got here is such a very beautiful story that I love to share with anyone that has any questions about how I came to become a death doula and my curiosity about death and dying.
Tell us about it.
So, as the story goes, about almost 8 or 9 years ago, my husband was stationed in Fort Polk, Louisiana. We are a retired Army family. And my husband was deployed at the time to Kuwait. And I decided to stop by the post office last minute, shortly before they closed, to mail out a little care package for him. And as I was standing at the counter, it was really just me and the postal workers. I heard the door open. And so I knew someone had come in to check their mail. And shortly after that, I heard very violent, forceful coughing. And I thought to myself, wow, whoever just walked in is having a very difficult coughing fit. And I thought, gosh, I hope they're okay. And within seconds of that, I just heard a loud crash. And I had looked to my left and I saw a man laying on the ground. And in that instant, I just ran over to him. Mind you, I had actually been getting over a very bad car accident, so I was dealing with a back injury and my mobility was not good at all. I could barely move. But when I witnessed the man on the ground, the pain and all of the things that prohibited me from having good mobility just ceased to exist. And I ran over to his side and I dropped to the ground, and he appeared to have been having a seizure. So the only thing that I knew as far as helping someone with a seizure is to turn them on their side. And so I kind of very carefully turned him to his side. And I knew at that moment the situation was not looking good. It was going really quickly. And all of the postal workers around us were in shock, which I can understand. It's scary when something like that happens, but there was no shock or fear that came over me. It was just, I need to be here and I need to hold his hand and I need to let him know that he's not alone. And so I did. I was caressing his arm and just telling him that I was so sorry that this was happening, but that he's not alone and it's okay if he needs to go. And I pretty much sat there with him. I don't know how it happened, but the emergency services had gone to the wrong post office. And so it took a while for anybody to arrive. And so I just sat there with him. I had no idea who he was. And I could really feel his life slipping away. And that had never happened to me. I've only witnessed someone who has died after the fact, but to be present in the process of someone slipping away and transitioning into death. It was so sad, but it was also a very miraculous thing to witness because I could feel him slipping away. And I just kept telling him, I am so sorry, but I'm here. You're not alone. You don't know who I am, but I am here with so much love and compassion for whoever you are, the life that you led. And honestly, that situation really stuck with me for a long time. I never found out who he was. I did find out just from talking with the postal workers weeks later that he had lived alone. And so I'm so grateful that he just happened to come to the post office that day because I don't know what would have happened if he had been alone. When I was there during his death, my son was actually with me, but he stayed in the car. And when everything was all said and done, I'd come out and I briefly told him what happened, but I didn't really describe to him, the details. But when we had got back a couple of weeks, my son stayed in the car again. He was a little afraid to be there, but he had a vision. He said he saw this beautiful glowing light and he saw a man appear from the light. And he told my son, I'm okay. Tell your mom, thank you.
Oh, that gives me the goosebumps in a really good way.
Yeah, I get so emotional talking about it because when I was with him, I was praying to anybody that was listening, to help him transition with peace. And when my son had shared that with me, he even described to me what the man looked like. And I never told him what he looked like. And I said, what did the man look like? And he goes, well, he had very white hair and he was wearing a yellow polo shirt and khaki shorts. And that, in fact, was what he was wearing when he died.
He was supposed to go to the post office that day. He lived by himself and he wasn't supposed to pass away at home. And you were supposed to be there. So you were both there at the right time.
Yes, it was such a profound experience. And it's something that has stayed with me. And, I always thought to myself, nobody should ever die alone if we can help it. Whether you're a stranger next to someone who's dying, whatever your relation may be, it breaks my heart to know that so many people die alone. And I'm so glad that the courage and I had the strength to be there to help him as he transitions into death, because everybody around me, it was chaotic. And I understand how everybody was feeling, when death is very present, we never know how we're going to react. As much as we prepare for it and have conversations, we really don't know what our reaction is going to be until we are finally in that moment.
When you were with him, did you have hope that he was going to make it, or did you realize that this was his time of transition?
I realized just based on observation as I looked upon him and saw my husband's in the medical field. And so we have a lot of conversations of, what death could look like and just, signs of death coming. And based on what he was going through, and it was a really hard ordeal for him. I just felt guided to be very soft spoken and, to just be a comforting present. However, I usually am very in tuned with my nervous system. And so I knew, and I thought to myself, wow, I was so calm in this situation. And there was a lot of chaos going on around us, but I was able to tune out the chaos and the noise and all of the conversations that were happening to really just be there with him. And it was almost like it was just me and him and everything else was quiet around us. And I'm just so grateful that I was there for him. And I think of him often, especially in this work.
Would you say that was the beginning of your journey to becoming a death doula? Because you were not a death doula at the time.
No, I wasn't. It was definitely the beginning. I've always had a curiosity about death and dying. And I've always spoke of death and dying like I do anything else, even though it's so taboo. I would talk about what I would like my death to look like and what I would want at my service. And I would just very, casually have these conversations. And usually the reaction is, wow, that's very macabre. And why would you even think about that? And I always said, well, why not? Sometimes if you're given the opportunity to plan for your death and get things in order and figure out what presents a good, peaceful death for yourself, then I think that you should. And talking about death is sort of a kind of like an activism type of situation because we need to talk about death and we need to offer a platform to be able to talk about death comfortably, to explore the fears surrounded by death, to really have those very deep, honest talks about it, non-judgmental, just, what's on your mind? What does your death look like to you? What do you think about in regards to your death? How do you want it to look like? How do you want it to be? Who do you want present? What kind of smells do you want around you? I mean, it's your death. We plan for so many events in our life, right? I feel like death should have the same respect.
And that should be talked about at any age.
Yeah, absolutely. It is never too early or too late to think about it, especially while we are healthy and while we can still make decisions for our own. I think not only does it serve a great purpose for the person who is dying, but it is also such a great service to your family, your circle of trust, your chosen family, anybody that is going to be present for your death because you have the ability to sort of plan for this and figure out how you can kind of ease this process because dying in itself is already such a very big emotional experience to go through. But if you're given the opportunity to sort of plan for it as far as you're getting your affairs in order and all of those other things that come after a death, I think that also helps your family, your friends, your circle of trust, go through the grieving process. Sometimes we don't have that opportunity. And, such as life, it's so unique, it's so precarious, you just never know.
Have you been wanting to ride your broom like you stole it, rather than hiding in the shadows? Theodora Pendragon is here to help your magic shine, whether you want to show the world your subtle sparkle, or you really want to light your fire. Visit Theodora's online store at witchcasting.shop. That's witchcasting.shop. Remember, there's never been a better time to be a witch.
You were not a death doula then, but I believe that was your calling. So when did you begin your training and where?
How it came to be was actually such a funny conversation. My daughter and I, we have these very deep conversations about everything, spirituality, you name it. And last year, I wanted to do something different to celebrate Samhain. I wanted to do something that was very meaningful to me and really aligned with how I view Samhain and how I view the afterlife and all of our ancestors and those that have gone before us. I said to her, well, I think this year I'm going to make as many offerings as I can, and I'm going to visit the cemetery nearby and just intuitively, place some offerings wherever I'm guided to and spend time with the dead and talk with them and honor them, maybe dust off the grave a little bit. And she said, Mom, I think you need to do something in service of death and dying, but what does that look like for you? So we played around with some ideas and, we looked at a groundskeeper at the cemetery and I had 0 qualifications. And in our conversation, I said, it's funny that you're suggesting that I do something in service of death and dying because out of nowhere, Instagram and the algorithm keeps popping up these death doula reels on my Instagram feed. Even though I had never searched for death doula, I didn't even know that death doula existed. I knew of birth doulas, but I had no idea what a death doula was. And so I kind of just glossed over it and we talked about it. And she said, well, what is a death doula? And I go, I know, we should probably look it up. Upon research, there were just thousands of stories of death doulas all over. And I was so deeply moved. I mean, the emotional response that I got just from reading these stories and what death doulas do and what they represent, it just felt so right for me. But again, sometimes I kind of have a little of resistance. I don't want to just jump right into something. And so I kind of just thought about it. I was grateful for the information and I just kind of let it do what it do. Maybe like a few days later, my husband had come home and I was telling him all about my conversation with our daughter and, my interest in becoming a death doula. He's a YouTube guy. So when he wants information, he's like, let's go to YouTube. He said, well, hey, let's look up something. And so I actually set an intention. I set an intention that I will find some guidance and find the answers that's going to help me kind of explore this curiosity with death and dying. And the very first video that came up was Alua Arthur, who is the founder of Going with Grace. And we clicked on it and I was just instantly drawn into Alua's story and how they became a death doula and how Going with Grace was created. I resonated so much with Alua and it felt so familiar to me. It felt like I was remembering. I knew this is what I had to do. And I knew that my search was over and this was just the beginning. I didn't even click on any other death doula pages out there. It was Alua for me. And I logged into the website and I signed up for the cohort that just happened this past January. And that is the journey of how I became a death doula.
Can you tell us about the studies Going with Grace?
So one thing that I love so much about Going with Grace. Now, I have not been a student for a very, very long time, and I have never really done any online training. And so the world of online training and all of this virtual stuff is so foreign to me. The last memory I have of being a student, I struggled. I struggled with being able to pay attention, being able to retain information, and sort of like keep up with my classmates. And so I had some fear around it. But when I began the course, the way that the course is curated, it is really in honor of everybody's unique nervous system. I mean, it's curated so thoughtfully and so user friendly. And each module that we go through, there's so much thought put into it. And it really, it's very self-paced. You do have 3 months in the course to complete it, but they actually give you a grace period of 6 months because they understand, everybody's got different things going on in life. They're always reminding us, like, no matter where you are in the course, you're exactly where you need to be. They were always so uplifting because life happens, Usually when I'm in study, my mind will tend to wander and start thinking about, 5 or 6 other things. Each course study in the module just really grabbed your attention, and I can really see how beautifully it was curated to really give you the best of what death doula work is, how to really gain all the knowledge from it. Such a beautiful course, and I suggest it to anybody.
Can you tell us some of the topics that you studied?
Oh my gosh. So I love the way that the course was opened. Before we even did a deep dive into what a death doula is, we had to get comfortable with our own death. We were given exercises and also a death meditation to sort of take us through the process of what dying could be like. And then we had a very deep discussion. Throughout the whole process, we journal that way because a very deep unraveling of self happens when you are talking about death and when death is the main subject. And we think about it every day, but how much do we really think about it? How much do we actually give our permission to ourselves to really think about it? Some of the topics, could kind of hit a nerve, but it's done so in a way where if you're uncomfortable or you need a moment, to really sit with that, there's so much support throughout our instructors as well as our classmates. We have such a beautiful community. But that was a very big part of the course, just really talking about your death and what does your death look like to you? What are your fears surrounded around your death? Because if we cannot get comfortable with our own death, how will we be able to do this service? And so it kind of brings me back to, self-care and working on yourself. I am in service to helping others, but if I cannot help myself, how can I help anybody else? So I really loved that we started that way. And throughout the course, we were able to watch some videos of, different ways that people have chosen to die, whether they decided to stop eating and drinking. We talked about hospice care and really dove deep into what happens when a patient transitions from curative care to palliative care, to where, it becomes comfort care, and, what that looks like for somebody. And it's so unique because you realize that every person's death is so unique. Their cultural background is so different. What's available to them, because it's hard. Some people don't have all of those resources for them.
As a death doula, do you also work with the families of the dying?
Yes. So ultimately, your client is going to be your first priority. And you are also there, as a support system to the family. And the family could be anyone. It could be their immediate family. It could be their chosen family, whoever the dying person deems as their chosen ones. But you're really just an extension of care. A death doula is the non-medical presence there. We are there to sort of help everybody through this transition. But ultimately, first priority is going to be the client. There will be situations where maybe the client is not verbal anymore, is in a nonverbal state. And so, you'll be hired on by the family. You're still there for the client, even though the client's nonverbal. And so I haven't done it yet, but through the training, and exercises, a death doula can be so many things. So it really depends on what your service is, because it's very broad on what you'd like to offer. And so going with Grace gives you all of these tools, and throughout the unraveling of self, you learn all the different ways that a death doula can service a dying person and their family. And throughout that process, I was able to kind of hone in on what my special talents and gifts are and what I would like to offer. I love that they were very open-minded with us to what we don't want to do and what we want to do. I think we're so used to everyone telling us what to do. But in this regard, it was, being very honest. What do you want to do? What do you don't want to do?
What would you say your talents and gifts are?
Throughout this process, I've had so much reflections. And because of my experience with the man that died, I know that my purpose is to be beside a dying person, to be present there as they are transitioning, to help them plan what their death looks like, whether it be bedside vigil, ceremony, ritual, how they would like things to be done. I am guided to work with children mostly. That is a whole nother thing. And I've been asked, are you ready to go down this road? Because, seeing a child die is extremely heartbreaking. But I just have this capacity within me and all of this compassion and just unconditional love to be that comforting presence to help a child as they're transitioning, but also help the family, and maybe it's because I'm a mother too, but I know that that's definitely my calling.
And also being a death doula, you'll have to deal with family drama. There's lots of family drama during weddings and funerals. So the dying process is probably no different.
Oh no, absolutely. something that I've learned when you are meeting with a client and their family is that you really have to be a very active listener, have a very soft front, strong back. And so part of being an active listener is really also observing the dynamics of the family, so that you know what the relationship dynamic is with the dying person. We're certainly not a mediator, but we can definitely be there to observe, different dynamics, but also come from a very deep understanding that their person is dying. Grief shows up for every single person very differently. And so it is so important to keep such an open mind and always know that it's not about you. It's not a projection of how they feel about you. Their loved one is dying. This is difficult. And so it's really just about taking a deep breath and just knowing that it's coming from a place of love, however it shows up. And that's how I see it. And so, just figuring out how to kind of maneuver, if we quietly, I know my instructor had said at one point they had to say, hey, right now, so-and-so is feeling really upset right now because it's getting a little tense. So maybe we need to take a walk. But it's also recognizing what each person can do also. I learned that when someone is dying, a lot of people, there are the doers. And so in their grief process, they need to feel like they need to do something. So it's really identifying, how can my client's loved one process their grief and sort of help out. So it's really having those conversations early on if you can, to see how they can do it so that, everyone feels like they have a place, because they do.
And there is no right or wrong way to grieve.
No, your grief is your own. It is unique to your own. And, grieving can show up in 1,000+ ways. Who are we to judge, right?
Have you ever heard of death cleaning?
Yes, we actually, so I don't know if it's going to be the same for you, but we actually watched some videos on kind of death cleaning and just things that people do to process grief and what they do, but also preparing for a death. And I mean, gosh, death cleaning was such a very broad, it was very interesting because when we think of grief, the only thing that we think of is just, tears and crying and everything. But some people become very constructive in their grief. Wow, grief can actually produce some quite amazing things from what I've seen. If you really take the time to sit down and listen to someone's story, it's amazing.
Can you tell us what death cleaning is?
I think for me, death cleaning, it could either represent a physical thing or even something internal. I feel like it's almost like you're kind of going through a purge of the soul. For me, it represents, okay, I am dying. I know what I need to do physically, but there's a lot internally that I sort of need to clean out and clear so that my spirit can ascend without the baggage is kind of what I think of, because I had seen so many different variations of death cleaning. But for me, that's what kind of resonates with me as far as death cleaning.
We may not all know how we're going to die. We may not have advance notice, so to speak. But for those who do have advance notice that their death is approaching, I have seen some responsible people take care of their own funerals, their own burials, and even getting rid of their homes and belongings.
Yes, absolutely. For a death doula isn't just present at the 11th hour when someone is passing. A death doula can be there to support a healthy person who is not even dying, to sort of get everything in order, because there's so much before you die. A death doula can help find the resources, if not assist you with your advanced directive planning, figuring out who is going to be your medical power of attorney person, and even going through your things, cleaning out your house and figuring out what are the sentimental belongings that you have that you want to hold on to, and who do you want to give it to? that was actually part of our practice in uncovering our fears and our ideas surrounding our death. We kind of had to talk about, what things do we have around us that have so much sentimental value, and, who would we like to have them? We had to write a story about it. And that was such a great exercise because as a witch, I am a collector. I collect so many things. And I thought, oh my gosh, and I'm talking just one room. I haven't even gotten into all the other rooms because we collect everything. We're not hoarders, we're collectors.
Guilty.
I mean, yeah, it's like, why do you have all these rocks? Well, why not? They're beautiful. The earth gave them to me and I had to bring them home. So I really had to sort of think, okay, what out of all of my things holds so much sentimental value? And my one thing was my Book of Shadows. That has so much meaning to me because how it was gifted to me and how I use it. And it was beautiful to see that when I gift my Book of Shadows to my daughter-in-law, who is also a witch, it will come full circle. So that was such a great exercise. But now is the time to think about our death, start working on our advanced directives, start working on your living will. We've seen it happen when someone dies and there's a lot of chaos afterwards because of bank accounts and passwords that you don't know, outstanding loans that may be floating around out there. I mean, gosh, you name it. Being present in death and being a death doula really sort of wakes you up to your own mortality. It sort of gives you a very different outlook on life. I thought that I was very present in life throughout my spiritual journey, but I am even more present in my waking life because we are literally gifted this breath of life. And while we are living and breathing, it has taught me to really appreciate even the small things and has clearly defined why I create certain boundaries and why I am very intentional about who, what, when, and where, because going with Grace's mission statement, and I love this, and it is something for everybody to think about, but it is, what must I do to be at peace with myself so I may live presently and die gracefully?
Live presently and die gracefully.
Yes.
That's lovely.
And it's almost, I want to die from a life that I loved. I want to die from a life that I loved and just all the things, it's this body that carries me. I never used to really think about it, but this body that carries my soul, I love it so much and I want to be good to it and take care of it because one day we will part from one another, and then the story continues in another thing. Really kind of coming to face with your death and opening up the communication lines of death can really help you appreciate, it's not something to fear. We are all going to die, and that is the reality. And it is not a morbid thing to talk about. It's not being negative at all. It's saying, as we were born and we were alive, we're also going to die. And so why not prepare for it? Why not think about it and get things done?
What advice would you like to give the listeners about preparing for their own death and or helping a loved one who's transitioning?
I think my best advice would be to really hold space for yourself and really think about your mortality, think about your own death, and be completely transparent with how you want it to be. I mean, honestly, we don't have control, but what do you want your death to look like? How do you want things to be? Are there flowers or is there music? It can go so many different ways. It is your own death and you can have it how you want. But it's really getting comfortable with your own mortality and really getting very open and honest about the fact that you are going to die. everybody around you is going to die. That is to not instill any fear, but it's also to kind of be an eye opener to have gratitude for the time that you do have with everybody. Even those moments that can be so difficult. If a family member annoys you, one day they will never annoy you, and you'll miss that. It kind of makes you realize not to take things for granted so much, and time really is precarious. So is that grudge worth holding on to? Maybe not. Start working on your reparations with anybody that you might have had a falling out with. Go and do the things that you want to do with whatever is available to you. Eat the food, get the tattoo, get the car, whatever it is, give yourself permission to live a life that you love, that you'll know you'll leave one day, but you'll leave a life that you love. As far as helping someone transition, that's a difficult one because not only are you dealing with your grief of losing someone that you love, but you're also trying to be strong for the person that is dying. It's really hard to kind of hold yourself, but to also hold the person. And I think that's where a death doula can really be so beneficial, to just be that extension of care and support, and comfort. There are so many ways to get assistance from a death doula. There's so much information out there. You can, participate in death cafes where it's just really conversations openly about death. It's not a grieving or support group, but death cafes just kind of get down and dirty into death, completely transparent and just raw. But I think that a person should do what feels right for them at the end of the day, because there is no right or wrong way to act. We're all so unique. And I think no matter what, it's coming from love. It's really hard. I don't think I can ever tell someone how they should be. I just want them to be themselves. Be your authentic self.
Karina, you're such a lovely guest. I want the listeners to know how they can find you so they can follow you.
Absolutely. So I do have my death doula page on Instagram, and it is called The Return to Earth. That means a lot to me because I am actually choosing a green burial for myself when I die. I am looking forward to nourishing the earth as she has nourished me throughout my life. But you can find me there. And if anybody has any questions, want to talk about death, or if you have any questions about how to become a death doula, my best advice to anybody is to start volunteering for a hospice. Is probably the best way to start. Get yourself out there and then do your research, and find a program that really resonates with you. There's so many beautiful programs out there.
And I'll put your Instagram link in the episode notes.
Yeah. Aw.
Thank you for coming back to Witchcasting with Theodora Pendragon.
Yes, thank you for having me. And the journey continues. I'm in my student era, so many more things happening.
The journey always continues. And isn't that lovely?
It really is. It really is. I'm so grateful, and I love life. I am just so eternally grateful and thankful that you've given me this opportunity and this platform to talk about all things spiritual. And that again, with my death doula journey, your podcast is the #1 podcast that comes up on my Spotify. I am subscribed because I have listened to almost every episode, and you have curated such a beautiful variety of different beautiful beings in the spiritual realm. And I have learned so much. And I usually do it when I'm getting ready for work. So it's such a great way to begin my day. And wow, definitely love your podcast, and so grateful to be a part of this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'm so grateful for all my guests. They're all so lovely, and they're all so unique.
Yes. And that's what I love about it, because you never know what you're going to get. And it is just so informative and so entertaining and just so fun. And it it continues to feed that curiosity within me. And I love it. I'm addicted.
I'm so happy that I have a lovely addiction for you.
Yes, a healthy one.
Thank you, Karina, for coming back.
You're most welcome. Thank you again.
You're always welcome to come back.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Thank you for being on the show.
Yes, thank you, Theodora.
Thank you for joining us for Witchcasting with Theodora Pendragon. Have a burning question or have a topic you'd love Theodora and her guests to discuss on the show? Contact her through Instagram at Theodora Pendragon. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And help us spread the word by leaving us a rating and review and sharing it with your friends. See you next time, and may your magic always shine.